The recent videos about the Oreshnik had a lot of views, but also there are some recurring questions that I could identify among the comments that I believe actually deserve an answer. Could an aircraft carrier being targeted and then hit reliably by an Oreshnik? Well, let's see. An aircraft carrier is a moving target. Well, unless it's moved, but yeah, I guess it doesn't count. And it's moving at a speed that is an order of magnitude of about, say, a kilometer a minute. The flight time of a weapon like the Oreshnik is in the order of a few minutes. Obviously, it depends from the range. It may vary to 3-4 minutes to 15 minutes or something like that. Moreover, the Oreshnik launch is easily detectable by satellites because there is most likely a large infrared plume caused by the first stage of the missile. And with a reliable information sharing chain, a carrier battle group could be informed 1-2 minutes after the launch. And this gives them enough time to sail to another place at different speed and in a different direction. So if the Oreshnik was launched to the projected impact point, there probably won't be anyone there. Unless the Oreshnik has some form of terminal guidance. However, I don't think that this is very likely because at the speed of impact that it has demonstrated, Mach 10, Mach 11, the warheads are A, completely covered in plasma, B, they need to have some form of thermal protection, probably some ablative material or some material that is strong enough to withstand the re-entry without any significant damage. Everything infrared will be completely blinded, and even placing a radar in the nose cone or anywhere on the front-facing side of the re-entry vehicle, yes, that's a tough proposition, I think. You can terminally guide a ballistic missile, but you have to slow down. And if these are just kinetic impactors, then sort of defeats the purpose. So the answer is no. The Oreshnik, to hit a moving carrier at sea, needs a lot of luck, probably. Another question was, yes, we know that it's very difficult to intercept once the warheads have separated because you have 36 targets and probably decoys on top of those. But let's suppose that you are capable of firing a very fast shrapnel, for example, with a railgun. And so you have a cloud of purely kinetic interceptors that may potentially hit at least some of these re-entering warheads. Well, it depends from several factors. It depends from the energy involved, potentially the size and the speed of the shrapnel. It depends on the angle of impact of the shrapnel, even though they will probably hit mostly from the front side because the geometry of the interception problem doesn't allow anything else. However, is it possible that one of these shrapnel maybe hit one of these kinetic interceptors without destroying it? But would that be enough to destabilize it? I believe that potentially yes. I mean, I suppose that they are quite streamlined and quite stable aerodynamically, but the damage that they may get could create problems. If they were thrown off course, they will probably become stable very soon again. But in the process, they lose a lot of speed, so their effectiveness would be really reduced. However, I keep thinking it is a very tough proposition. I mean, you probably really need a railgun to do this kind of interception, and railguns at the current level of technology are still experimental weapons, so the best chance to counter a weapon like the Oreshnik is to hit it before the warhead separation or hit the single warheads before the submunition separations. This is not impossible, but it's quite hard. Another pretty common question is how you can tell if the missile being launched is conventional or nuclear. The answer is exactly yes. you can't tell if it is armed with nuclear weapons or with conventional weapons. And this is the reason why this type of missiles that allow for a very short flight time, but they are potentially armed with nuclear weapons, are considered very destabilizing weapons. And that's the reason why there was a treaty prohibiting them. The treaty no longer exists. I won't get into the detail how it happened because it's a really contentious subject. But yeah, no, you have no way of telling. And that's very, very, very dangerous. And by the way, this is the reason why the Russians said that they will notify the United States and other nuclear powers before using this weapon again. Which I mean is better than nothing, but nothing forbids them to do a surprise attack. However, I have to repeat it again. This is not, in my opinion, a nuclear blank, like some say. This is a demonstration of a different type of weapon, the intermediate ballistic missiles, that makes sense as a conventional weapon with kinetic warheads or even potentially conventional explosive warheads. This is not a new nuclear weapon. It is a different type of weapon. And this brings us to the next question, because some say, well, if there's no way of telling whether it is nuclear or conventional, then you may expect an immediate nuclear retaliation. So a weapon like this will never be used or will likely never be used in anger for real. Well, retaliation with what? I mean, the only nuclear weapons remaining at the moment in Europe are the B-61s, that are gravity nuclear weapons that needs to be carried very close to the target by an aircraft. So it is very difficult to imagine an immediate retaliation. I mean, this scenario, the very dangerous scenario, would be the Russian launch the Oreshnik and NATO launches before the Oreshnik impact another salvo of nuclear-tipped missiles against Russia. This is not going to happen because there are no intermediate-range nuclearly armed weapons in Europe. And when the missiles land and you realize that we're not nuclear, then it is extremely difficult to justify a nuclear retaliation, at least in the face of the public opinion. The situation is going to change. It's not going to remain like this. It's probably going to change quite soon when the new US hypersonic weapons will enter service. I do fully expect that. But for the moment, there is no risk of immediate retaliation. There is the risk of a retaliation, of a nuclear retaliation. But as I said, it is quite difficult to justify if the attack was purely conventional. The French have the ASMP, which is a non-strategic weapon, which is sort of more suitable for a retaliation, but is still an air-launched missile that needs to be prepared, mounted on an aircraft, and the aircraft needs to fly at a suitable distance to the target, which is, as we know, not that easy. However, again, if the attack was conventional and you don't attack the French, then it becomes very difficult to justify a French retaliation, and even more so if you're talking about a retaliation with strategic weapons, with SLBMs or ICBMs. Another common point that came up in the comments under the Oreshnik video is the fact that at the end of the day, many believe that Putin will never use nuclear weapons because he knows that if he does, it's going to be the end for him and for Russia. They will be completely destroyed. This is probably a bit misguided because, as we said before, the Oreshnik is a new and particular type of conventional weapon. However, I think it's worth discussing this because this is part of a larger debate that happened where some analysts seem to believe that a winnable nuclear weapon may happen. Honestly, I beg to differ. Any war among major nuclear powers is not winnable because at the moment one of the parties get to the point of being defeated, then you will start having nuclear weapons falling from the sky. And with nuclear weapons, even if just few of them are functional, even if just few of them detonate, even if they're not precise, the damage that is created is such that is unsustainable for anyone. How can any government, but even a dictatorial government, accept that you will have 10 millions of dead civilians? That spells a death sentence for any government using nuclear weapons. those on the losing side have very little to lose, so they may potentially initiate a nuclear exchange, but those on the winning side will have everything to lose, and they will lose everything, or they will lose so much to make basically the victory relevant. Furthermore, some believe that there is a sort of a barrier between the use of nukes on the battlefield and the use of strategic nukes or a large attack with strategic nukes. I think that they are deluded, honestly, even because a proper tactical use of tactical nuclear weapons, it's not just the use of 1, 2, or 3 weapons. It's the use of dozen weapons. I invite you to look up the plans that the Soviets had for a European invasion with tactical nuclear weapons to see how many they were going to use. It's unbelievable. Even though it's not a strategic exchange, the damage will be almost as bad as in a strategic exchange. Another question that some have left is, well, from your video, it seems that the Russians could defeat NATO, but how comes that they can't even defeat Ukraine? No, that's not my point. What I'm saying is that the Russians have just delivered, they've just created a new type of conventional weapon that is sort of changing the balance of force in a potential Russian-NATO confrontation. When it comes about defeating Ukraine, well, the Russians are defeating Ukraine. You may not like it, but that's what's happening. Yes, of course, the Russians are paying a hefty price, but the price that Ukrainians are paying is even larger, and we are assisting to the real destruction of Ukraine. And the only way out is negotiation that will reach at some point a compromise that will be horrible. Nobody will like it, but it's definitely better than having these many people dying every day. Because I would like to remind you the worst thing that may happen to a human being is actually dying. So thank you very much for watching this short video. Thank you very much to all those who support the channel on Patreon or by being a member. You are absolute stars. I would love to hug you all. And if you can support the channel financially, which is perfectly fine, do it only if you can. Please subscribe, like, leave a comment, interact in any way. It helps immensely with the algorithm. So this is it. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.